The International Criminal Court is and was conceptualized to be a court of last resort. It was conceptualized to come into action when domestic courts or domestic criminal justice systems are either unable or unwilling to punish perpetrators of the worst forms of violence known to humanity. To quote the Special Prosecutor for the ICC, Luis Moreno Ocampo, in a statement he issued on a visit to Cambodia in August last year, he said, and I quote, "With the International Criminal Court, there is a new law under which impunity is no longer an option. Either the national courts must do it or the ICC will." And so it's critical for us to understand that the ICC was never meant to be the court of first resort. Unfortunately, with regard to Kenya, we seem to have gotten ourselves into a situation where we think that there was a 50-50 choice, that it was either the Special Tribunal for Kenya or the ICC, which in itself is a bit misleading because obviously the International Criminal Court focuses on those who bear the greatest responsibility. And the prosecutor has already indicated that he's going to investigate at a maximum of 4 people, in which case what happens to the other hundreds or possibly thousands of both high-level, middle-level, and lower-level perpetrators of post-election violence. The fact that, at least as of now, we seem to be largely agreed, there's consensus that crimes against humanity were committed during the post-election violence, during the crisis. And so the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is very, very clear in his mind that Kenya is a key candidate for the exercise of the court's jurisdiction. To use his words, he says Kenya can serve as an example. And he says that Kenya can serve as an example, I think, in two ways. One is that it can serve as an example where the ICC, by acting appropriately and in a timely fashion, is able to prevent a worse sort of catastrophe in 2012. And that, I think, explains why he seems to be in such a rush to get things done. As we have seen since he left here, there was a lot of quick movement in the establishment for him applying to the presidency of the court to convene a pretrial chamber, which was even done before he left Kenya. And just last week, he then made his formal application to the pretrial chamber to give its authorization for him to proceed. The other way in which Kenya is a first is that under the ICC Rome Statute, there are 3 ways in which cases can be referred to the ICC. And one is by a state party, secondly is by the UN Security Council, and thirdly by the prosecutor exercising his own powers.
In the last maybe 2 weeks or so, you're already beginning to see signs that there are political realignments, in relationship to Mao, that kind of stuff. Some of those probably also have to do with issues like the special tribunal, in the sense that certain people in government are perceived as supporting certain things that certain people are against. And certain people are being told that if you don't support these, your job is on the line, and so forth and so on. So what this really requires, the first implication, is that it requires what you call political will. And when we talk about political will, we are not just talking about the will of people in government or the will of politicians to do certain things. The most important will, when it comes to political will, is the will of the people themselves. It is very, very important. Because if you the people support a special tribunal today, that bill will pass. One would suspect that one of the reasons why there's been intransigence on the part of some politicians to support that bill is because they've looked at the public, and the public has been maybe very lukewarm or maybe very skeptical for understandable reasons, of course. Don't be vague, go for the Hague. What are we doing? We actually, in a way, we are abdicating political responsibility. So it is very, very important for people to realize in this country that it is really the people who need to push these things. But we need to take cognizance of the fact that if we drop this thing in the lap of Ocampo, he said it very clearly, that is, he can only deal with 2 to 5 cases. What will happen to the rest? And let us make a snapshot of our political history. In 1992, we had land clashes, stroke ethnic clashes. Then there was what? The Kiliku inquiry. Where did that go? If you go to the government publisher, you can buy a copy of that report. Nothing happened. In 1997, 1998, again, the Akihumi Commission, a very good report. What happened? Now again the Waki report. But now we're saying, okay, we want to do something, but we want to hand it over to Ocampo. Why? Maybe Ocampo can play a part, but there's a part that we must play also as a country.
What will the bill investigate? Murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, forced pregnancy, torture. And if we look at all this from a gender perspective, I've just alluded a bit to murder. If we look at extermination, again, the social arrangements are destabilized, and later on, there are consequences. Unresolved issues from the previous episodes of violence that we have been the basis, or rather gave a very strong justification for the violence that we suffered at the end of 2007 and at the beginning of last year. And I think the special tribunal then gives us an opportunity to put an end to this impunity, not only for the violations against women, but also for the violations against the men who were violated not in their own right, but also violated, not only in their own right, but violated so as to destabilize the societal setups in which they lived.
When people deliberately, when people elected by their representatives, when people elected by the electorate, they simply boycott debating a law that is meant to give Jerry and millions and thousands of other victims a face. What does that say about those leaders? Because that's a real challenge. What do they say about millions and millions of Kenyans who have been crying for justice? Do they really represent the people who elected them, who suffered, who died, who continue to die? Do those people really have rights? Because I think those are the real challenges. And when the Prime Minister stood on the floor of the House about 2 weeks ago and we decided not to refer the Kenyan situation to the ICC because that would have declared Kenya a failed state. What has in essence has just happened is exactly what Kenya government refused to do, because the matter is being handled by ICC. But the point is this: will ICC justice be able to satisfy the victims? ICC, even if it's going to prosecute, is going to prosecute just a few. What happens to the thousands of other criminals who must be prosecuted? And the challenge is, therefore, we must look at the broader picture, not to be narrowed down to the smaller picture. How I wish a member of parliament today can lose a seat of parliament for standing for justice and the cause of the victims, other than standing on the axis of impunity, which actually they are standing for. Which you can be rewarded today, what about tomorrow? We have to look at this thing from a holistic point of view. The people who killed in 1992, 1993, 1997, because they became more bold because nothing was done to them, in 2007, they repeated it even in a more vicious way. So what happens in the next? We must be able to ask a question. How many more victims do you want in this country in order for this country to come to its senses and have criminal accountability brought forth for purpose of ensuring that those people who thrive in violence, those people who thrive in criminal activities are held to account, not only for their crimes, but for ensuring that such kind of crimes will never happen again.
This word impunity, we have to put it in context. Sometimes I sit down and I try to wonder what impunity means. And somebody was saying, do we understand what it is? impunity, for me, let me illustrate with a saying that you get when you're in the estates or mtaa. Have you heard this statement that we will do na utadu? Yes, tutafanya na utadu. That's the impunity. In other words, we'll do it anyway, even if it's wrong. But what will you do? You have nothing to do. We'll still do it. Yeah, you're complaining, yes, that murder is bad. Yeah, but we can still murder. Utadu nini? That is, just to illustrate, that is what impunity is. And it transcends not only these aspects of crime, but also in other instances, like corruption. That yes, we will steal. But what will you do? Utanipeleka wapi? So that is, to me, that is now what is impunity. And just to urge the audience that at this time, we are at a very critical moment. Of course, we have the Constitution that we are thinking of. I want just to tell you that even as you think of the Constitution, we should not lose our focus on certain things, because it is during this time of the Constitution, because they know, that gang know that people are now busy with the Constitution. This is the time that things normally happen, certain things. These are the things that, this is the time that things happen. And I can tell you, this is the time we have even had documentation that now they want to pay Anglo leasing. We have even cabinet memorandum that is going there for the payment of the money. So you can see they know that there's a lot of things happening. Mao here, people are shouting Mao, there's Constitution here. Then that is when they do the other things. So we have to remain vigilant at all times. I'm
supporting the bill because I've always supported setting up a special tribunal. I sit in the Pan-African Parliament, and in the Pan-African Parliament we have seen countries that have gone through the processes that Kenya is trying to go through, and the only countries that cannot take up this process on their own are countries that have had such failed states, failed governments, that they are literally saying we cannot handle our own issues. I don't think that's where Kenya is. Number two, the kind of injustices that were done to women, that were done to young people, are not the ones that ICC will deal with. And unless we deal with those issues, certainly people will not heal in this country, and therefore 2012 will just be a repeat of 2007. Politicians are the victims. Politicians are the perpetrators. Politicians are the people who had interests. So obviously, leaving this process to politicians will not work, because amongst those politicians are those who feel pained that their communities were affected, are those who took part in planning, are those who took part in retaliation, are those who felt that the process was flawed. So this whole issue coming to Parliament and being left only to parliamentarians and not engaging the Kenyan people cannot succeed, because the interests in Parliament are too high for it to be looked at in a fair manner. First and foremost, this special tribunal allows us to heal. There is nothing more important for a human being who has gone through some atrocity, whether it is rape, whether it is your property being destroyed, even if you will never be able to recreate your wealth. One thing you want is people to acknowledge that your wealth was taken away. People to acknowledge that, yes, you were raped, you are now probably HIV positive, or you are carrying a pregnancy through rape. It's just a sense of justice. And there's nothing more important to a human being, let me tell you, in everyday life than a sense of justice. That something which was done wrong to you has been acknowledged, and either you are paid back for it or somebody just apologizes for it. But justice is the beginning of any healing or reconciliation process. For us, we have the Truth and Justice Commission that is also going to be coming up. It's called Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission. That, if this does not work, becomes the next avenue that Kenyans can use to be able to start the healing process. We have a National Healing and Cohesion Act that was passed that, for me, is not even being taken seriously. If it was being taken seriously, for example, the kind of meeting that was held at the Pan-African the other day would not have been allowed by law. Yet the Minister for Justice himself attended that meeting. And that was a meeting of preaching hatred. Yet we have now a law that says anybody who is instigating hatred should be arrested. So all those people there should have been arrested, including the Minister for Justice. So I am saying that the only thing that Kenyans can do, first of all, let's learn to hold our people accountable, our leaders, whether or not you believe so much in them and they come from your community and you feel that maybe they can offer you some jobs. It's not true. what Kenyans need to know is that they are the sovereignty of Kenya, not the parliamentarians, not the government. They are the reason why Kenya is called sovereign. Our sovereignty lies within ourselves as Kenyan people.